So we've all been at the movies and we're enjoying an old-time picture, or maybe it's the latest blockbuster summer thriller, and a radio arrives on the screen. Somebody's using a radio to call in the planes to attack the monster, or maybe it's a spy movie where they're using the radio to contact their operatives. But sometimes we get very disappointed because the radio looks like it's a piece of test gear that they hooked a microphone to, rather than the proper set that is a tangible representation of what might be in the correct period during the movie to be the transmitter, receiver, transceiver, communicator, whatever it is, whether you're talking to aliens or you're talking to a liaison in another tank. It would be nice if the radio was actually in context with what's going on in the movie. Some movies get it right, okay, right out of the box, and they're using the correct equipment, the logical equipment. It's the end of the world. It might be logical that they're using a ham radio from the 1960s because that's all they could get their hands on. So you get my drift. And as a kid watching a lot of older movies, serials from the 30s, which were being rerun when I was a kid, and of course all of those World War II war movies that came out during the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Yeah, I really paid attention to the radios they were using in these movies. Let's look at some of these interesting radios that found their way into both episodic TV, movies, serials, and sometimes even in comedies and shorts. And everybody from the Munsters to Gilligan's Island got in on the radio fun. So that's what this video is all about. It's all about movies that have radios.
First, a quick disclaimer. Obviously, I got all of this material from the internet, and these grainy pictures are presented as fair use of the material. Also, the number of examples is very numerous, and probably almost as numerous as the number of shows and movies. So I'm only going to be showing a few examples. Maybe I'm going to miss some of your favorites or better examples, so let me know in the comments. Also, many radios remain unnamed or too hard to see, so help all of us out by citing a radio you might identify in the timeline, in the video, in the comments. Sometimes the radio placement in a movie is just too accurate, and that's the case with the Doris Day comedy, The Glass Bottom Boat, MGM 1966. Turns out that Arthur Godfrey, also starring, he was a rabid ham, K4LIB. So Doris has got this 20-foot antenna. She's got a board full of DX QSL cards. She must be a contester. And she's using a KWM2. What else would the most beautiful spy use, right?
Tell them we're in a jam. Icing up, losing altitude. We're turning northwest until we run out of gas.
Well, if we go northwest, Captain, we'll fly right off the map. It says uncharted up that way.
Okay, all of you ham and military or radio collectors and users, here's a movie that is an absolute must. Island in the Sky accurately shows off all of the radio gear of the C-47, including the liaison comms, the ARN radio compass setup, what a dynamotor sounds like on dead batteries, and proper use of the Gibson Girl rescue transmitter. I'm not giving any more away, just watch this movie. In the 1950 20th Century Fox movie American Guerrilla in the Philippines, several radios are shown in proper context, as well as a full shortwave broadcast station. In one scene, a jungle breadboard transmitter is constructed with a pair of 211s in the final, and the Japanese successfully employ radio direction finding gear to locate it. In Paramount's 1955 film, Strategic Air Command, Jimmy Stewart is called back to pilot the B-36 bomber. This plane has all kinds of interesting and familiar gear on board, including the venerable ART-13 transmitter. In 20th Century Fox's 1965 film, The Flight of the Phoenix, Jimmy is again flying with some friends, an ART-13, a BC-348, and an old command set ARC-5. The question is, why didn't he get the German to get the ARC-5 running, send an SOS, instead of completely rebuilding a plane and flying out of the desert? There are so many ridiculous examples of radios being abused and misused on different comedies and movies. But one that comes to mind is Red Skelton and Lucille Ball in the comedy The Fuller Brush Girl, where they break into a military depot and get stuck, but it's full of radio gear and they try to call for help. And of course, Gilligan's Island, where the professor appears to be making a transmission with some type of plug-in unit for a BC-191. The Munsters seem to have a BC-654 ham radio foundation in their setup. But I consider the best of the best to be Andy Griffith in No Time for Sergeants. Here's the link. You need to stop everything in your life right now and watch this YouTube clip. This will teach you basically how to repair a BC-375 main transmitter in the B-24 bomber. When I was a kid, and probably for TV filler, they used to play these old-time serials that were shown in the theaters years before. A serial film is basically a motion picture consisting of a series of short subjects exhibited in consecutive order in the theater, and it advanced weekly until the series was completed. They were by design very exciting, with lots of high-tech, dangerous villains, even more dangerous superheroes, very exciting. Lots of radio props were everywhere on screen. This is the golden age of radio. As you're going to see, Helicrafters dominated, and they used these pictures as kind of a PR bonanza, no doubt helping them to secure contracts with the military when World War II came along. Canadian Mounties versus Atomic Invaders? Oh yes, this is quite possible back then, and a bunch of radios were required on both sides. Helicrafters, of course, is everywhere, and military surplus comes in and continues to make appearances all through the golden age of the serials from the 30s into the early 50s. And based on the dates of release of these radios, Helicrafters made sure that they were featuring their newest creations. Some even prototypes or first-run sets, some quite rare. Using loop antennas for transmission now. So were the bad guys back in the 1930s. One bad guy is even using a wireless set 19 along with a Helicrafters transmitter on his plane. We got to track that guy. Excuse me, Miss Engineer, would you please rotate the antenna? And National Radio got a real coup by supplying the receivers for the Kon-Tiki expedition from Peru to Polynesia in 1947. This was a big deal, kind of like a space shot or a moon shot of the time. The transmitters that they had on board were low-power battery jobs and basically homebrew at 10-watt input power. But the receiver was a National. And apparently that 173 even took a bath in salt water. And they just rinsed it off, dried it in the sun, and the thing continued to operate for the rest of the raft trip. The name is Bond, James Bond, and all of the Bond movies are loaded with radios. Some would look pretty good in my shack even today. there are radios I simply can't figure out, like these jobs in the German radio center. I don't know what's going on here. These all look like some kind of big marine radios from the 50s, but they made it into the movie. Contact showed off ham radio in a very positive light, sort of as a foundation for this girl to have a career in space exploration. It was really a great movie. Her radio seems to be a KWM too. That's interesting. A Drake does show up in the movie High Frequency as we move forward into the 2000s. There's also an ICOM receiver and the much storied FRG-7. Somebody must have raided your shack and got those. Yaesu again makes appearances in The Bank Job, and the FT-101 shows up again in the blockbuster Independence Day, where it saves the world, of course. Frequency brings us back to reality with a simple Heathkit transceiver, providing the comms somehow into another dimension. Leave it to Heathkit to come up with that. And serials are really not dead. They may be dead on the big screen. Well, maybe you could count some of the movies as serials. It just takes a few years between episodes. But they're basically dead on the big screen, and they're well alive on episodic TV. They seem to work great on TV. Shows like The Walking Dead, Fear the Walking Dead, and The Americans used a ton of gadgets, electronics, and radios of all kinds. So I probably missed a ton of your favorite movies and shows, and I probably made a few mistakes as well. But hopefully this gets you to pay attention and look for radios in the shows that you watch every day.
Come in. This is File Ballard reporting from Shy Peak. I highly advise immediate evacuation. The fires are spreading fast. At this rate, I say all of the Sierra and most of Yosemite will be gone in about a week. If there's anyone still out there who needs assistance, please respond. It's been 2 days since I heard from Central Comms. Ramos was supposed to be back at the tower this morning, but I'm starting to fear the worst.
I have to give the Americans a lot of credit for showing both a Hammerland and a Hallicrafters as an ode to the old serials. Good job.